So let's now proceed with our agenda for this evening, moving forward. No? So I do hope that each and every one of you were able to watch the video link that I've indicated last Monday. No, I allowed you to finish it last Tuesday as well. No, so safe to say dapat lahat nakapanood na lahat at natapos na maikli na naman yung video. Okay. All right. So kindly open first your packet tracer, no, as advised. No, we'll be performing first, okay, or we will be creating the network topology that we will be using as part of our discussion, okay, for VTP and Ether channel. No, I'll be sharing with you my screen. Don't worry. So alam na to ng mga dating naging estudyante ko, ano? For those, no, that have me as first time, no, that you'll be having me as your professor, just kindly follow whatever I'll be doing here on Cisco Packet Tracer. We'll be doing it simultaneously. Wala namang maiiwan dito eh. Unless hindi ka na lang gumawa or hindi ka makinig. Okay? All right, I'll be recording this session.
Recording in progress.
Okay? So for VTP class, okay, what I want you to do, kindly drag and drop, no, 2950 24 port switches. Kindly drag and drop that in this manner. Okay? Kindly drag and drop those 4 switches based on the layout that I've created in my packet tracer. Okay. Was everyone able to follow? Nasusundan naman po?
Yes po.
Yes po. Yes po.
Okay. Next, kindly drag and drop an 1841 or a 1941 router. Either one will do. Okay. Next. Okay. Next is what I want you to do. Kindly drag and drop generic desktop computers. No? Ilagay nyo sila, in my case, under switch 2 and under switch 3. Okay? So for each of the switch, drag and drop 3 generic desktop computers. Place them in that manner. Tapos na po ba, class? Nagawa po?
Yes po, sir.
Okay. If you notice that if you notice that the pace is getting faster, please do tell me, please do call my attention so as we can wait for you. No? Para lahat so as we can perform simultaneously, magkakasabay tayo. Okay? Next. So we'll now be creating the logical connections. No, we will be patching, no, the connections between the switches. Okay. So first is, no, get a copper crossover. So between switch 0 and switch 2 in my case, no. So select, okay, select FA020. Then terminate it on to FA020 as well of switch 2. So ganyan siya. FA020 of switch 0 as against with FA020 of switch number 2. Straightforward naman yan. Lahat nakakasunod dapat. Okay. Next, we'll be creating an interconnection as well between switch 1 and switch 3. Using the same interface as well, FA020 ni switch 1, kay FA020 ni switch number 3. Okay. Create that connection. Nakakasunod po yung iba?
Yes po, sir.
Yes po, sir.
Yes po.
Good. Yes po. Next. Okay. Let us now Okay, create a link between switch 0 to switch 1. No? Use FA016 naman in this case. FA016 on both switch 0 and switch 1. So again, class, I just would like to remind each and every one of you, your lab is done individually. No? So yung lab na ibibigay ko for both BTP and interchannel is related to what we're doing right now. No? So if I were you, follow all instructions that I'll be presenting. No? Kasi it's the same series of steps, same series of procedures that you need to create with your own lab exercise. Okay. Next, let's now create a termination between router 0 towards switch 0. So using a straight through cable, okay, using FA00, terminate it on to FA024. So FA00 ni router 0 towards FA024 ni switch 0. Nakakasunod po lahat?
Yes po.
Yes po.
Okay.
Yes po.
Next. Okay. So let's now move on to the computer. So starting with PC0 under switch 2. Itong computer na to, no, terminate nyo kay switch 2 using FA01. Okay. Next, using PC1, okay, terminate it onto FA06. Okay. Next, PC2, terminate it onto FA011. Okay. Next. PC3, okay. Terminate it onto switch 3 using FA01. Okay. Next, PC4, FA on its fast Ethernet, terminate it onto FA06 of switch number 3. Okay. And lastly, PC5, terminate it onto FA011 of switch number 3. Was everyone able to follow? Nasusundan po?
Yes
Yes
po.
po, sir.
Okay. Next. Okay. So I'll be creating the VLAN table. Okay. So let's create VLAN 16. We'll name it as planning. Then the interfaces membered onto it should be FA01 to 5. Okay. Then it has a subnet of 192.168.16.0/24. Next, we have VLAN 26, named as engineering, in which membered interfaces are FA06 to FA010. Okay. The subnet to be used onto it is 192.168.26.0/24. And lastly, we have VLAN 36, named as optimization, in which interfaces FA011, okay, to FA015 are membered onto it. Okay, the subnet to be allocated or to be used for VLAN 36 is 192.168.36.0/24. Okay. So, was everyone able to complete the logical topology? No, nagawa naman lahat ng physical patching. Wala pa tayong config class, ha. We're not yet even performing any configurations. No, what we've established as of this moment is just to create the network topology, but in terms of the actual logical config, wala po tayong ginagawa. No, I'll be presenting the scenario later. No, lalagtawan ko muna tong VLAN table. Proceed muna tayo sa BTP. Lahat po ba nakasunod, class, doon sa topology na gawa naman?
Yes po, sir.
Yes po, sir.
Okay, kindly save your file, no? Okay, so let's now proceed first with VTP. Okay, yung mga na-under sa akin just recently, no, nung Cisco 2, ipinaliwanag ko na ito. No? So, for those that were not my students, anyway, don't worry. It will still be covered here in Cisco 3. No? Don't worry on the notes. Okay, I'll be sharing with you the notes. Can everyone see the PowerPoint presentation? Kita po?
Yes po.
Yes po, sir.
So let's now start discussing VTP. Okay. So what is VTP? VTP stands for VLAN Trunking Protocol. No? So from what you've watched last Tuesday or last Monday, no? So you were able to have a glimpse on how does VTP work. Okay. So what's the primary purpose why we implement the VTP in a converged network? Okay, mamaya papaliwanag 'yon. Okay. We will also be describing the operation. So how does VTP operate? What is its basic function, basic concept? How does it work? Okay. So we will be discussing topics such as, okay, meron tinatawag na VTP domain, meron tinatawag na VTP modes. We'll also be discussing VTP advertisements and what is VTP pruning. Okay. Then obviously at the end of this chapter, no, we should be able to configure VTP, yun yan, using the network topology that we have just used, that we have just created, I mean. Okay. So what is VTP, class? Okay. So, di ba, in a traditional setup, okay, if you want to configure a VLAN onto a switch, di ba, ano bang ginagawa natin if we want to create a VLAN onto the switch? Go to the command line interface, type VLAN ID, then the name. Di ba, class? Very simple. No? But what if the scenario requires you as the network administrator, you are tasked to configure VLAN 30 across 100 switches. Okay? Yung isa, 5, 10, pwede pa eh, no? Even 20, no? Manageable pa. Okay? But if you're tasked to configure VLAN 30 across 100 switches, no? Di ba, class, isn't it somewhat what do you call this? It's not very easy to perform, although it is doable, okay? But it is time consuming, no? Plus, there is a factor wherein, no, human factor. Possible mapagod ka, no? Nasa last 80 nasa 80th switch ka na, feeling mo pagod ka na, ramdam mo na yung pagko-configure, no? Apparently on the 81st switch, instead of typing VLAN 30, VLAN space 30, sa pagod or antok mo, no, na i-type mo VLAN 20. No, hindi VLAN 30, VLAN 20. Okay, so in that case, no, may mali na kagad. There is already an inconsistency, okay, in the switching network that you'll be configuring. Okay, that's why there is another scheme. There is another implementation. Okay, if you're tasked, no, to configure multiple switches, hundreds, even thousands of switches, just configure BTP. So paano ba gumagana si BTP? I'll be discussing the concepts. Okay. The way BTP works, class, okay? So this is a layer 2 messaging protocol. So pag sinabing layer 2, it only works for switches. Walang BTP sa routers. No? May BTP sa multi-layer switch. Okay. So the primary purpose why we configure BTP is to maintain VLAN configuration consistency, okay? Whenever we add, no, whenever we delete or whenever we modify, okay, VLANs across a switching network. Okay? So yun yan, yung isang scenario kanina, no? VLAN 30 dapat ang kinoconfigure. Sa sobrang pagod mo, sa sobrang antok mo na, no, na i-type mo instead na VLAN space 3, no, VLAN space 2, 0 ang nailagay mo. No? So there's already an inconsistency in that scenario. Okay? So what VTP does, class, it minimizes misconfigurations. Okay, yun nga. If there are any misconfigurations, any inconsistencies, okay, VTP limits it. So what are those problems? Yun nga. Duplicate VLAN names, incorrect VLAN ID. No, yun ang most common eh, yung VLAN ID number. No, nagkakamali doon. Okay. So how does VTP work, class? How does VTP work? Yung sa scenario kanina, you have 100 switches to maintain. You are tasked to configure VLAN 30 across those 100 switches. What you need to do, okay, is just by, okay, configuring VLAN 30 on a single switch, in this case S1, okay? Si S1, no, si switch 1, it will be the switch that will be propagating those VTP information to the rest of the switches. Okay? So ang mangyayari, no, do sa scenario kanina, 100 switches. Out of those 100 switches, isa lang ang kailangan mong lagyan ng config. Then that lone switch would be pushing the VLAN 30 config to the rest of the 99 switches. No? So it's much more doable, less time consuming. No? It's much more easier. It's much more convenient. Okay? Now, sir, no? How does BTP operate? What are the requirements? Is BTP enabled by default? Yes, class. BTP is enabled by default. However, no, there is a requirement. No? Hindi gagana basta-basta si BTP without these requirements. No? Mamaya, I'll be enlisting them. Okay. So what does BTP offer? No? It has features in which it has a messaging system. Okay? So yung messaging system na yun, ang ginagawa ng messaging system na yun yung nagpapagana ng VLAN advertisement or VLAN at BTP advertisements towards other switches. No? Okay. BTP, again, it also allows consistency, VLAN configuration consistency, okay, across a common administrative domain. No? So I'll be enlisting one of the primary requirements before we configure BTP. The first requirement needed by BTP to work is we call as a BTP domain. Okay. So BTP domain, think of it as a boundary. A logical boundary. Okay? Kumbaga, within the BTP domain, whichever switch is within the BTP domain, those switches will be receiving the BTP advertisement. Whatever VLAN configuration information is pushed, it's only confined within the BTP domain. Okay? So you might be asking, sir, no? What is the BTP domain? Sineset po ba yun? Okay? The answer is yes. Opo, sineset po yun, class. Okay? Now, sir, paano po namin makikita yung BTP domain? Okay. Balik po tayo doon sa packet tracer, class. Okay? I'll be sharing with you my screen using the packet tracer application. Okay? Can everyone see my packet tracer window?
Yes po.
Sige. Let's now move on to switch 0. So enable. So under switch 0, sir, paano po namin makikita yung BTP status? Here is the command. Show BTP status.
Sir, hindi po ata kita yung CLI niyo po.
Wait lang Ayan po, kita na po yung window.
Yes po, sir.
Okay. So again, no, the command is show BTP status. Ayun po, naka-highlight. No, show BTP status. Okay. Were you able to perform that show command, class? Nagawa po?
Yes po, sir.
Sa privilege mode, yung may sharp sign, okay? Now, saan po makikita yung BTP domain? Ito, class, oh. Do you see this output? Kita nyo yan?
Yes po, sir.
Now, sir, wala naman naka-indicate na BTP domain eh. Okay? So what's the value, no? Class, the actual value of the BTP domain name, by default, it is set to null. No, null, wala. N-U-L-L. It's a null value. Okay? Now, sir, no? Sabi nyo kanina, we need to set the BTP domain name. Yes. No? There is a command in configuring the BTP domain name. Mamaya natin gagawin. No? But I'm just listing down the requirements. Sige, isama ko na dito. Okay. So sa binanggit ni Sir sa atin, no? We need first to configure a BTP domain name. Mamaya, gagawin natin yan isa-isa. We'll be listing them down. No? We'll be creating them. Okay. Balikan ko lang yung PowerPoint presentation. Can everyone see the PowerPoint presentation, class?
Yes po, sir.
Sige. Next. By default, okay, a catalyst switch is in the no management domain state. Yun nga, naka-null siya. Okay? Until it receives a BTP advertisement for that domain over a trunk link. Okay? So, may isang binanggit dito, no? So, in order for BTP to work nga, yun, no? It needs to have a BTP domain first. Okay? May binanggit dito sa statement na ito. Ano pa ang kailangan ni BTP para siya gumana? Nandun yan sa video link na yung kay Rick Graziani, no? Nandun siya sa link na yun. Andito rin siya sa last statement. No, ano ang kailangan? I'll be calling a student. Sige, Rafael Franco.
Sir, hindi sure, pero try lang. Ang sa tingin ko po, ang kailangan para magawa yung VTP domain is yung trunk link po.
Correct.
Dapat po muna mag-connect.
That's good.
Yun po.
Ayun, binanggit naman doon, no? The domain will be sent over a trunk link. So the second prerequisite, that's good, Rafael, good work. The second requirement or prerequisite in order for BTP to work is configure a trunk link. No? So ano ba ang trunk ulit? Oh, Cisco 2 basic, no? Pag sinabing trunk, switch to switch, no? So between switch 2 to switch 1 there is a trunk link. Switch 1 to switch 3 there is a trunk link. No, basic 'yun, no? So we need first to establish a trunk link before the BTP domain can be configured or can be sent across the switches. Okay? So balikan ko lang ulit yung packet tracer, no? Balik ulit tayo sa packet tracer. Kita po yung packet tracer ko, class?
Yes po, sir.
Yes po, sir.
All right. The first task that we will be creating or that we will be performing, I mean, no? Let's create or let's activate the trunk link between switch 0 to switch 2. The command is for both switches under interface FA020, switch port mode trunk, no shut. Okay, that's the config. Okay. So, pasok tayo kay switch 0. I'll be showing you my config for switch 0. Okay. Conf T class, conf T tayo. Palitan natin yung host name, no? Host name, switch 0. Pakigawa po yan, class. Okay. Next. Go to interface FA0/20, switch port mode trunk, then no shutdown. Class andyan yung config sa chat message naka project din sa naka-share din sa Zoom Naka-share din yung window ko sa Zoom ng Packet Tracer. Okay, yun yung binabanggit ko kanina. There's no reason for you not to follow kasi lahat ng script will be provided. Okay? Tapos na po for switch 0 class.
Yes po.
Okay. Let's now move on with switch number 2. Are you able to see my window for switch number 2, class? Kita po?
Yes, sir.
Okay, let's replace the host name. Host name switch 2. Okay. Then also under interface FA020, switch port mode trunk, no shut. Yan siya, class. Pakigawa po. Is everyone finished?
Yes po.
Next, let's now proceed with switch 0. Okay, facing switch 1. Okay. Type the config, no? Interface FA0/16, switch port mode trunk, then no shut. No? So we will be configuring switch 0 towards switch number 1. Okay. So go back again to switch 0, class. Punta ulit kay switch 0. Okay. So under switch 0, interface FA0/16, switch port mode trunk, no shut. Nagawa po kay switch 0, FA016, nagawa, class.
Yes po. Yes po.
Next. Let's now move on with switch number 1. Okay. So with switch number 1, class, no? Let's replace the host name. Okay. So interface FA0/16, switch port mode trunk, no shutdown. That's a config for switch number 1. Nagawa po ba, class? Nagawa?
Yes po, sir.
Okay. Next, let's now move on to step letter C. Okay, for step letter C, we will now be configuring switch 1 to switch number 3. No, the trunk between switch 1 and switch 3. Okay. So, it's the same, no? Interface FA0/20, switch port mode trunk, then no shutdown. Okay. I'll be sharing with you my screen for switch number 1. Okay. So, interface FA0/20, switch port mode trunk, then no shutdown. Pakigawa po kay switch number 1, class. Nagawa po kay switch number 1. Interface FA020, switch port mode trunk, no shut. Tapos na po.
Yes po,
Yes
sir.
po.
Okay. Next, let's now move on to switch number 3. Okay. Go to CLI. Okay. So let's replace the host name. Switch number 3. Okay. Interface FA0/20, switch port mode trunk, no shut. Di ko na isama yung host name. Wait lang. Is everyone finished?
Yes po. Yes po.
All right, class. Okay. So let's now proceed with configuring the VTP domain. No, kasi we've already set the trunk links, no? Yun yung isa sa prerequisite, no, na binabanggit when configuring VTP. Next is, no, let's set the VTP domain, no, for step letter D. No, let's set the VTP domain, no? We'll be configuring it on switch number 1, no? So, what's the VTP domain name syntax? The command is VTP space domain. Okay. In this case, let's set it to dito. Okay. So, go to switch number 1. So type end muna, type end. Go to privilege mode. Balik kayo ng privilege mode class. Just to check and validate, no? What's the VTP domain name of switch 1? Show VTP status. As you can see, it is also set to null. Yan yung default value. Okay? Now, in order for VTP to work, dapat daw may VTP domain name. No? Let's set the VTP domain name. The config is VTP domain dito. No? As you can see, there is a syslog, no? VTP domain changed from null to dito. Kuha po, class. Nagawa. Were you able
Yes
to
po.
configure it in switch 1?
Yes po.
Yes po.
Yes po, sir.
So let's validate it, no? Let's check the VTP domain name, no? Show VTP status. What's now the current VTP domain name of switch 1?
Dito po.
Dito.
It's now set to dito. Okay. Now, class, what I want you to do, kindly check as well switch 0, switch 1, switch 2, and switch 3. Paki-check din yung VTP domain name nung tatlo. Switch 0, switch 2, at switch 3 class. Pakigawa po. So, class, did you notice anything?
Sa switch to po wala.
Yung switch to wala. Bakit? No? Again, class, the VTP domain name is sent across
Uy,
trunk
ginagawa
list.
niyo.
So, ang pinadalhan lang talaga ni switch 1 is si switch 0, okay, and si switch 3. Kasi doon sa topology class, so kung titingnan po natin, no, ang nakakonect kay switch 1 is switch 0 and switch 3. So, what we need to do, configure it as well in switch number 2. Okay, pakigawa po yung VTP domain dito rin kay switch number 2. I'll be showing you my window for switch 2. Kita po yung switch 2 ko, class.
Yes po.
Ayan, no? VTP domain name dito. Pakigawa din po. Yan. Take note, ha, the VTP domain name, this is case sensitive. Is everyone finished, class? Nagawa po?
Yes po, sir.
Yes po, sir.
Okay, let's now continue with our discussion.
Sir, nakamute ka po.
Okay, class, sorry ah. So in this slide, it's basically discussing the default BTP configuration based from the show BTP status. No? So what would you expect? No? What are the values that would you expect, no, on a brand new Cisco switch? Okay. So first is BTP version is set to 1. Okay. There are actually two BTP versions, BTP version 1 and BTP version 2. Ano pinagkaiba po sir ng BTP version 1 as against with BTP version 2? BTP version 2, it can support VLAN VLAN IDs up to 1 from VLAN 1 to VLAN 4094. Okay, yun yung VLAN 2. VLAN 2, yun yung BTP version 2 I mean. Okay? With BTP version 1, I just forgot the exact range, no? But BTP version 1, okay, in most Cisco switches nowadays, by default, it is already set to BTP version 2. Okay? BTP domain name, ito nga yung binabanggit ko kanina, it has a null value, walang naka-indicate. That's why you need to set a BTP domain name. Okay? Next, BTP mode, it is set to server, no? Ito pa yung isang kailangan in order for BTP to work. Aside from trunk interfaces, aside from BTP domain, you also need to set the BTP mode. I'll be discussing later what are the different BTP modes. Okay? Next, what is a configuration revision number? Mamaya ipapaliwanag ko to, no? Para saan ba yung revision number? This is actually used in checking VLAN consistency across switches. No? Para mo malaman, in order for you to validate and to check, okay, that the VLAN consistency is the same across the BTP domain within the switches, there is a corresponding value that is mapped onto it. No? VLANs, no? By default, the current VLANs, ito yung laman ng VLAN database mo. Di ba ang default VLAN, it is set to 1. So every time you add a new VLAN, okay, this value changes. Okay? Maliwanag po, class? Any questions? Okay, next. Let's now move on to the next slide. Okay. Next, we'll now be moving on with BTP roles. So tapos na po tayo sa BTP domain names. No? BTP domain, I mean. We've also discussed the importance of trunk link as well. Ito yung nagpapagana sa BTP. Okay? The third prerequisite, okay, in order for BTP to work, is set the corresponding BTP modes. Okay. So, what is a BTP mode, no? Pag sinabi pong BTP mode, we are referring to a role, we are referring to a function in the BTP. No? So each switch by default, ano ulit yung BTP mode by default? Class, from the previous slide, ano yung default BTP mode? Starts with the letter S. Nakikita siya ngayon dito sa slide. Miggy Gonzalez.
Server po.
It's set to server. No? So all switches by default, they are set to server. Sir, is that a good setup in which all of my switches are set to server? Answer is no. No? If you're implementing BTP, there should only be dedicated switches that is set to server. Kasi pag lahat yan ginawa mong server, any changes done on each of the switches, no, it will be reflected to other switches. No? So you as a network administrator, you only want to limit BTP advertisement to certain switches. No? For example, meron kang BTP, meron kang switch for LAN A, meron kang switch for LAN B, meron kang switch for LAN C, in which it is only these switches which will propagate the BTP modes, not all of the switches within those local area networks. Okay? Malinaw po ba, class? Malinaw po?
Yes po.
Yes po, sir.
Okay. So what are the VTP modes? No, let's now move on to the next slide. All right. So there are actually 4. Wala dito yung isa, no? So there are 4 VTP modes. I'll start first with server. Okay? So what is if a switch is set to VTP mode server, yun yan, ito yung default value, no? What it does is it allows the switch, okay, to create, modify, and delete VLANs within the VTP domain. Okay? So yun nga, ito yung binabanggit kong danger, no? If you set all of your switches as server, no? Each time a new VLAN will be created to one switch, it will be sent across other switches, no? What we want, no? There should, by default class, ang good design practice, there should only be one switch set as the server. No? That's the design guideline in VTP. Next, it sends and forwards VTP advertisement. So once you create, once you modify, once you delete a VLAN in a switch set to server, it will be sending and forwarding those VTP advertisements within the VTP domain. Okay. Next, it also synchronizes VLAN configurations. No? So in which does it synchronizes VLAN configurations? What it does is, yung VLAN database niya, yung VLAN database nung server, okay, will trigger a match or will trigger a scenario in which it will have the same values to the VLAN database of a switch set to client. Yun ang mangyayari dyan. Once a switch set as server creates, modifies, and deletes VLANs, no, yung VLAN database niya, no, will be an image mirror nung current VLAN database ng client. Mamaya ipoprove natin to. Okay. Nakuha po, class?
Yes po. Yes po.
Okay. Next. Don't worry, we'll be having a break by 7:30. Next. The second VTP mode is what we call as a client. Okay. So if I set my switch as a client, no, what are the functionality? How does client operate? No? If you set a switch set as client, no, these are its characteristics. First, you cannot create, you cannot delete, nor even modify VLANs in a VTP domain. No? So hindi ka makakapag-add, hindi ka makakapagbura, hindi ka makakapagbago ng VLAN information. No? Those can only be done in the server. Okay? Next is it sends and forwards VTP advertisements. Okay? So, di ba class, no, binanggit ko kanina, ang magpapadala ng VTP advertisement is server. Sir, anong ibig sabihin itong sends and forward VTP advertisements ng client? No? In this case, once a client receives a VTP advertisement from the server, so nakatanggap si server ng VTP advertisement kay client, ang gagawin ni client, it will act as a relay. It will also be sending those VTP advertisements across its trunk links to other switches. Okay. Next, another characteristic ng client, it synchronizes VLAN configurations with the server. Yun nga, yung VLAN database ng server is equivalent sa VLAN database ng client. Normally, in a properly designed VTP network, no, yung mga client switches, okay, these are typically set in the access layer. No, yung mga switches facing computers and devices, fax machines, IP-based phones, yun yung mga set as client. No? Any questions, class? Wala naman po. Last, may tanong po ba?
None po.
None so far, sir.
Next. Let's now move on to VTP mode transparent. No? Tapusin ko lang tong slide na to, then we'll have a break. Okay. If you set a switch naman into transparent, no, how does it operate? What are its characteristics? First, okay, you can create, you can modify, and you can delete VLANs local. No? Paano ba pag sinabing local? No? Okay? When we refer to local, it only corresponds to the switch itself. No? Every time a switch set as transparent, if you create, if you modify, if you delete VLANs, no, it won't have any impact in the rest of the VTP environment. No? It will not be reflected, class. Hindi magbabago. No? If a switch set as transparent, it only forwards VTP advertisement. So in a way, similar to a client, it acts as a relay. No? Although it is not influenced, so class, ulitin ko lang po ulit. If a server triggers a VTP advertisement or a VLAN change, no? Pag natanggap ni transparent 'yon, no, it will just be simply it will be accepted, it will be received. Okay, then it will be relayed across the rest of the network within the rest of the switch. However, no, it does not synchronize VLAN configurations with the server. No, so whatever instruction the server is sending to its switch set to transparent, no, it will be passive. No, it won't apply those changes. No, it will just simply ignore those VTP advertisements. Hindi niya papansinin yun. It does not synchronize VLAN configurations with the server. Malinaw po ba, class?
Yes
Any
po.
questions, clarifications? Sige. Time check, it's 7:18. Okay. So let's have a break. Okay. Please be back po by 7:50 p.m. No, we'll continue with our discussion. Sige po, class, have a break muna. 7:50 p.m. Balik po tayo, no, as part of our discussion involving BTP. Sige, class. So from where we left, okay, we basically described the VTP modes. Okay, meron kang server, client, transparent. There is actually a fourth VTP mode, no, called as VTP mode off. No, so yung VTP mode off, basically what it does, okay, is if you set a switch set to VTP mode off, no, it won't be receiving any VTP advertisements. No? Ang pinagkaiba niya sa VTP transparent, no, it can receive VTP and relay it to other switches. If a switch set to VTP mode off, it won't receive or it won't accept the VTP advertisement sent, and it won't also relay the VTP advertisements to other switches. Yun ang pinagkaiba nila. Okay. All right. So for this instance, class, we'll be setting switch 0 as client. Okay. Switch 1 as server. Switch 2 as client. Okay. And switch 3 as client. Okay. So for step letter E, okay, so switch 0, switch 2, and switch 3. Okay, let's set the VTP mode. VTP mode, then client. That's the command. No, I'll be sharing with you my screen, no? VTP mode client. Okay, switch 0. Next, switch 2. VTP mode client as well. Okay. And last but not the least, switch 3. Was everyone able to follow? Nasusundan po?
Yes po.
Yes po, sir.
Yes, sir.
So kindly check switch 0, switch 2, and switch 3. Okay, perform show VTP status. Just kindly check the VTP mode if it's now set to client from server. Pakigawa po, class. Pakicheck po si switch 0, switch 2, and switch 3. Is it now set to client, class?
Yes po.
Yes po,
Yes
sir.
po.
Yes po, sir.
Okay. Next. Burahin ko na to. Let's now move on to step letter F, no? So primarily in switch 1, okay, we'll be configuring VLAN 16 name planning, VLAN 26 name engineering, and VLAN 36 name optimization. Okay. So go to switch 1 class. Ang gagawin natin, no, we will now be configuring the 3 VLANs based on the VLAN table that I've created. Okay. So how to check the VLAN database? Show VLAN brief. Okay. So as you can see, VLAN 1 is only configured in switch 1, no? So conf t VLAN 16 name planning. Next, VLAN 26 name engineering. VLAN 36 name optimization. Yan, class. Pakigawa po yan kay switch 1. So after you have configured it on switch 1 class, perform again show VLAN brief. Kindly inspect if VLAN 16, 26, and 36 are now in switch 1. Is it there, class?
Yes po, sir.
Yes po, sir.
Yes po.
Okay. Now, class, what I want you to do, for step letter G, okay, switch 0, switch 2, and switch 3. Okay.
Hindi ko kumain.
Kindly check the VLAN database, no? Show VLAN brief. Okay. Kindly check the VLAN database of switch 0, switch 2, and switch 3. Inspect if the 3 VLANs are there. No, I'll give you a sample, no? Switch 3. So as you can see in my switch 3, VLAN 16, 26, and 36, nandoon sa VLAN database ni switch 3. No? So without ever configuring switch 3, the VTP advertisement was sent by, sino ba nagpadala ng VLAN information kay switch 3 class?
Switch to
Server.
switch 1 po.
It's the
Switch
server.
one.
Sino yung server?
Switch
Switch 1
1.
po.
Switch
Switch
1,
1.
correct. Kay switch 1 galing tong mga information na ito, no? Let's check switch 2. Okay, switch 2, it also has VLAN 16, 26, and 36. Malinaw po, class, na susundan?
Yes,
Yes,
po.
po, sir.
Yes po,
Yes
sir.
po.
Now, sir, no? Kanina po binanggit niyo sa amin, no? The VLAN database between the server and the client is synchronized. So, from what we validated, parehas yung VLAN database ngayon ng server at saka ng client, right, class? Tama po ba?
Yes po.
Yes
Now,
po.
sir, no, how can we check, no, aside from the VLAN database, is there any value or parameter that we can check and validate, no, that can actually prove that the VLAN database are synced between the server and client? Yes, meron po, class. Punta kayo ng switch 1. Okay, go to switch 1. Show VTP status. Okay. Now, look at this value, configuration revision. What's the value, class, of the configuration revision?
6
Po,
po.
sir.
It's set to 6, right? Okay. Next, look at the number of existing VLANs in switch 1. No? You have VLAN 1, 16, 26, 36, which is 4. Then 1002, 3, 4, and 5, which are special VLANs. Total of 8, right? Class, tama po ba?
Yes po, sir.
Yes po.
Now, which of these two will tell us that the server is synced with the client? Answer, class, ito, yung configuration revision. The configuration revision of the server should match with the configuration revision of the client. Punta tayo sa isang client, switch 2. Show VTP status in switch 2. What's the current revision number, class, of switch number 2?
16
6
po.
po.
It's also 6 as well. So this basically tells us that this client is currently synced. No, yung VLAN database niya per se is synced with the VLAN database of the server. Kuha po, class?
Yes po, sir.
Sige. So we're actually through with BTP, but we will be continuing with the network topology. Next, let's now move on with step letter H. No, we will be configuring, no, switch 2 and switch 3. We will be performing VLAN port membership. Okay. So int range FA0/1 to 5, switch port mode access, switch port access VLAN 16, no shot. Okay. Sir, bakit po FA01 to 5 tapos VLAN 16? O, tingnan po yung VLAN planning, yung VLAN table. No? Sa VLAN table, VLAN 16, no, ang mga i-member daw dito is 01 to 5. No? So yung interfaces FA01 to 5, no, in terms of static VLAN port membership, we are membering them to VLAN 16. Kuha po, class.
Yes po.
Next, int range FA0/6 to 10, switch port mode access, switch port access VLAN 26, no shot. Okay. And lastly, int range FA0/11 to 15, switch port mode access, switch port access VLAN 36, no shot. Okay. So perform it in switch 2 and in switch number 3. Okay, I'll be sharing with you my packet tracer window. That's the config for switch 2. Okay, next, let's proceed with switch number 3. Ayan po, class. Was everyone able to follow?
Yes po, sir.
Ano po yung iba? Nagawa po ba nung iba? Nagawa naman po yung step letter H?
Yes po.
Yes
Yes
po.
po, sir.
Ginagawa ko
Yes
po,
po,
sir.
sir.
Sige. So, if everyone is finished with step letter H, we will now be proceeding with step letter I, in which we will be assigning respective IP addresses onto the computers. No? So PC0, take note, this is under VLAN 16. So let's give it an assignment 192.168.16.10. Okay. Next, PC1, no, under VLAN 26, 192.168.26.20. Next, PC2, which is under VLAN 36, 192.168.36.30. Okay, that's the IP address to be assigned for PC2. Okay. Next, for PC3, no, since this is under VLAN 10, let's place an assignment of 192.168.16.11. Next, PC4, no, under VLAN 26, put an assignment of 192.168.26.21. Lastly, PC5 is under VLAN 36, put an IP address assignment of 192.168.36.31. So what I want you to do, class, no, ito sample. No? So, for VLAN 10, yung mga naka-assign as VLAN 10, set the gateway as 192.168.16.1. Okay? Sorry, VLAN 16 pa lang. VLAN 10. Next is VLAN 26. Set the gateway to 192.168.26.1. Next is VLAN 36. Set the gateway to 192.168.36.1. Okay. So ito class lalagyan ko na para madaling sundan na. VLAN 10. Yan si PC0 VLAN 10. VLAN 20 si PC1. VLAN 30 si PC2, yes. Sorry.
VLAN 16, 26, and 36.
Sorry, VLAN 16, yes. Sorry, my mistake. VLAN 16,
26
VLAN 26, and VLAN 36. Next, PC3 is VLAN 16. PC4 is VLAN 26. PC5 is VLAN 36. Okay. So, ganito po mag-assign ha. I'll be giving you an example. Hindi ko isa-isahin ha. Okay. So, double-click on PC0 which is under VLAN 16. No? So, go to desktop. Okay. Then go to IP config. Set it as static. Okay. So, the IP address should be 192.168.16.10. Subnet mask /24. So, it's 255.255.255.0. No? Set the gateway to .1. Okay. Then hit the IP configuration subwindow X. No? Go to command prompt to check if the IP config were applied. IP config. No? So as you can see, the IP address is set to 16.10. Okay? Pakigawa po doon sa iba. PC1, PC2, PC3, PC4, PC5. Take note of the assignment of the IP address together with the VLAN at yung mga respective gateways. Sige po, pakigawa po muna. I'll give you 2 minutes to finish. 2 minutes. Class, is everyone finished?
Yes po.
Nalagyan na ng IP addresses, lahat ng mga computers.
Yes po.
Yes po.
So, next is, let's test, no, yung intra-VLAN communication, yung VLAN 16 to VLAN 16, no? So, ito class, oh, nakikita nyo to simple PDU. Or kahit, sige, diretso tayo PC0. There's one way. PC0, punta kayo ng command prompt. Okay. So, ping 192.168.16.11, yung kabila. Yun nandun sa kabilang switch, kay switch number 3. No? Can you, so from 16.10, can you ping 16.11, class?
Yes po.
Yes po.
So basically what it does, no, what it basically confirms is that our trunk links are working, no? Yung trunk natin between the switches, no? It acts as a conduit, it acts as an extension, no? In order for intra-VLAN communication to happen. Next, no, there's also another way, no? Mas simple, no? Simple PDU, ito class, oh. Do you see this icon, simple PDU?
Yes po.
PC1, no, VLAN 26 with PC4, VLAN 26. As you can see, ICMP, it's successful. Pag nag-fail first time, no, ulitin nyo ulit. Do you have the same output, class? Was it successful, PC1 to PC4?
Yes po, sir.
Yes po.
Okay. Next, no, VLAN 36 naman, no? VLAN 36 PC2 to VLAN 36 ni PC5. It's also successful. Pag nag-fail at first, no, it's still establishing ICMP. Perform again another simple PDU test. Is it working, class?
Yes po.
Sige. So kindly save your file. Mukhang hindi na ako aabot sa Ether channel. Next Tuesday na lang tayo. But I'll be finishing our discussion for VTP. No? Tapusin ko lang yung VTP. Okay? No, Kester, no, iba ang Ether channel, no? Don't worry, were you able to watch, Kester, the video that I posted last time? Oh, what does Ether channel do? But what does it do? Anong concept ng Ether channel? Kasi iba yung sinasabi mo na iba yung mag-communicate sa iba't ibang PC po. No, that is inter-VLAN which we haven't yet done. So hindi Ether channel 'yon. No, that's inter-VLAN, no? We haven't yet done Ether channel nor inter-VLAN. Don't worry. Step by step nating ipapaliwanag 'yan. Don't worry. So how does VTP work? No, what's the VTP operation? So again, no, VTP advertisements, they are sent across a VTP domain. They are sent as multicast. Ano ba yung multicasting? No, sent, no, so it's a message sent to a particular group. 'Di ba? Unicast, 1:1. Broadcast, broadcasting company, 1:many. Multicast, you have a source that will be sending information to identified group of recipients. In this case, no, yung mga identified group of recipients sa VTP are those that under the VTP domain name. Next, VTP servers are always synchronized with the client by means of the configuration revision number. Nakita na natin yun. No? VTP advertisements, they are continuously sent every 5 minutes or when there is a change. So paano ba pag sinabing change? When a VLAN has been added, deleted, or modified. Okay? So VTP mo, lalagpasan ko na to, nagawa na natin. We were able to prove it earlier. No, we were able to check no in the switches no from the server switch in which si switch 1 no we were basically able to prove that in switch 0, switch 2 and switch 3 the VLAN database appears to be the same or is equivalent to that of switch 1, which is the server. So in each VTP advertisement, a revision number is always included. No? The higher the configuration revision number, it indicates that the VLAN information being advertised is more current or is more updated than to what is stored. Okay. Any questions, class? Any questions? Any clarifications? Class, wala na po bang tanong about VTP?
None po.
None po, sir.
Sige. Hindi na kasi tayo aabot I still need roughly about 45 minutes to cover Ether channel. But nevertheless, no? Balik tayo doon sa packet tracer, no? In preparation for our discussion on Tuesday. Sige. Next class, no? So what I want you to do, okay, between switch 0 and switch 2, no, we will be expanding it into 3 links. No, kasi kung makikita nyo, there's only one interface between switch 0 and switch 2. Okay? It was found out that the traffic being generated by the clients in switch 2 is more than 100 Mbps. So, ang current capacity between switch 2 to switch 0 is fast Ethernet, 100 Mbps. No, based on the traffic profiling found, no, it's more than 100 Mbps. So, in this case, no, we need to expand the links. We need to expand the segments, no. So, get a copper crossover cable, no, terminate it onto FA021, then terminate it onto FA021 as well of the
Sir,
switch.
you're not
Yes.
showing your screen po.
Sorry. Can you see my screen, class?
Yes po.
Yes
Ulitin
po.
ko lang yung scenario. It was found out, okay, that PC0, PC1, PC2, those that are terminated in switch 2, it generates a traffic more than 100 Mbps. No? So yung uplink ni switch 2, no, facing switch 0, won't be enough to accommodate the traffic, no, generated by the 3 hosts. No? So we need to expand the links between switch 0 and switch number 2. No? So get a copper crossover cable. No? Terminate it onto FA021. Okay. Then get another copper crossover cable, terminate it onto FA022. We will be expanding the links from fast Ethernet na isa, 100 Mbps, we will be expanding it into 3 para maging 300 Mbps. I'll be explaining the details next Tuesday. But definitely, it was already discussed in the instructional video that I've posted. No? Nandun na kay Rick Graziani yun.
Sir, excuse po.
Yes.
Sir, yung pangatlong link po is FA0/22 po.
So, yung mga interfaces na gagamitin, so di ba currently FA020, di ba?
Opo.
So, idagdag nyo si FA021 saka si FA022.
Okay, sir. Thank you.
Sige. Pakigawa muna yan kay switch 0 at switch 2. Sige, pakigawa po. Okay, next, class. Next na po tayo. Do the same thing as well between switch 1 to switch number 3, no? Currently 20, di ba? Dagdagan nyo rin, 21 and 22. So expand them into 3 links as well. No? So kung matatandaan nyo no, dun sa video, ano ba ang purpose ng Ether channel? No, why do we perform Ether channel? No? First and foremost, the reason why we create an Ether channel is to perform bandwidth aggregation. In that case, no, if we're performing bandwidth aggregation, we are improving or we are increasing bandwidth capacity. Naintindihan po, class?
Yes po.
Yes po, sir.
Yes po, sir.
Okay. Next, between switch 0 and switch 1. So currently it's 16, right? FA016. We will also be expanding it into 3 segments, no? So use FA017. So add 18, no? So currently it has 16. Add 17 and 18 onto it. So magiging ganyan ang itsura niya. Then kindly save your configuration, no? We'll be using it next week as part of our discussion for Ether channel. No? Then right after Ether channel class, we'll be having your first lab exercise. No, may lab exercise kayo right after our discussion. Okay, I'll be providing you the details for your first lab exercise right after I cover Ether channel. Nagawa po ba, class? Nagawa? So kindly save your config, no? Keep your packet tracer file, no? So we'll be using the same logical topology that we did today, no, as part of the continuation with Ether channel on Tuesday. No, wala munang assignment, no exams yet. I'll still be discussing Ether channel next week. Okay? Any questions, class? Any clarifications before I dismiss the class?
Wala po, sir.
All right.
Wala po, sir.
Sige. So if there are no more questions, I'll see you again next Tuesday. Have a good evening, everyone. Have a good weekend. Mag-ingat po palagi.
Thank you po,
Thank you
sir.
po,
Thank you po,
sir.
sir.
Thank you po, sir.
Sir.
Tama po.